Welcome to the award-winning Grad School Femtoring Podcast, the place for first-gen BIPOCs to listen in on inclusive grad school stories and learn about personal development and productivity tips. This is Doctora Yvette Martinez-Vu, a certified coach, consultant, and author, and I will be serving as your Femtor, providing you with insider knowledge to help you reach your personal and professional goals. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. This is your host, Doctora Yvette. Today, we get to talk about a new memoir, and by the time you all get to listen to this episode, it will have just come out, fresh out. It's called Smart Girl, and in particular, we'll be hearing more about how this memoir and its author are redefining Black and first-gen narrative. Our guest is a returning guest. Her name is Dr. LaTanya L.T. Rease Miles. As a first-generation college graduate and thought leader in higher education, she has been instrumental in establishing successful programs for first-gen students at both UCLA and Loyola Marymount University. In her many leadership roles, including her current role as Partnership Development Representative at Re-Up Education and co-founder of My Tribe Media, she advises institutions on first-gen student experiences. She's been doing this for a while, y'all. She regularly champions initiatives for non-traditional adult learners and contributes to scholarly discourse on first-gen experiences. Her influence extends to the digital sphere, where she has co-founded several online communities, including a national Facebook group that empowers first-generation students. I believe there's also a LinkedIn group accompanying that too.
And you know, all the platforms, that's what we say.
So welcome once again to the podcast, LT.
Well, thank you for having me back, Dr. Yvette. Such a pleasure to be in your company. And I love how we've been doing this more and more lately, right? I appreciate you coming to speak to my graduate students last quarter. So great to be in your company.
Yes. Oh my gosh, your grad students. So lucky to have you. That's such an incredible class. Which, by the way, can you say just the title of the class so that folks can know?
I don't remember what I teach so many classes.
Okay, tell us what it's about, not the title.
I think that one was
it was the impact class.
Yeah, don't put me up on the title. Yes, it was a foundational course. This was in the Santa Clara University Department of Educational Leadership. And that was foundational for social impact. And so my goal was really to expose the students, give us all sort of a baseline on what is this thing called social impact and how does it intersect with education, both K through 12 and higher ed. It was amazing.
Yeah. I asked you not to put you on the spot.
Oh, no, no worries.
Just because that class, the topic of the class is so pertinent. I just want students, like folks, to be aware, like these are the types of conversations and topics that are being had in graduate programs. And this is something that folks could look for themselves if they're searching for different graduate programs, like what types of topics are being had that are relevant to what's going on today. So I just thank you for mentioning that.
Come on over to Santa Clara University, y'all. We doing it up.
Yes. Okay. So as you can tell, we've known each other, LT, and we've known each other a while. LT was here on the show actually 2 years ago.
Was
already.
It 2 years ago?
Yeah.
I thought it was last year.
I know. It was February 2023.
No.
Yes. What? And it's February 2025 now.
I would have it was right before I started writing the book. I started writing a book in April.
Wow, that's wild.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So for folks who want to learn more about LT and the work that she does and to hear her thoughts on supporting non-traditional students and adult learners, check out episode 177. But for folks who are listening now, I want them to know if there's any updates on, aside from writing an entire memoir, any updates on you and what's been going on with you in the last 2 years since you were on the show.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I was just thinking as you were describing all of my roles that I'm actually leaving Re-Up. That's new news. I've been so blessed, Yvette, to have a lot of interest in the book, and I'm gonna pause for a minute, take a not too long sabbatical, and really lean into the book and have great conversations, both in the K through 12 space, higher ed space, and other spaces. So I'll be doing that starting next week. Well, I've been doing it, I've been juggling it, but I'm gonna start focusing on that. And I guess the other thing still, you mentioned My Tribe Media, for which I'm a co-founder. It is a nonprofit, and really just kind of putting 10 toes down with that as well, and really focusing and getting that off the ground. It's not new. I've been doing that work for a while, but there's these moments, as you know, where you just have to kind of like dedicate a lot more time, and I'm going to do that for a little bit too. So that's the latest.
Wow. I didn't expect that kind of update. That's huge. Oh my gosh.
You're breaking news. You are breaking news.
I just want to say congratulations, because that's such a big moment, such a big transition. And also to get to dedicate this amount of time to this work that really, it seems like it's your life's work. It might not. And I'm sure there are many different, I mean, we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff right now tied to the memoir, but like you're a very multifaceted person too, but you really have been committed to this first gen work and amplifying first gen stories, especially like nuanced first gen stories, Black first gen stories, redefining the first gen story and experience. That I just think it's a really amazing way of modeling that eventually you get to a point where you're like, this is it. I'm taking a sabbatical and I'm focusing on what matters most. And right now in this moment, it's your memoir and yourself and your work.
Yeah. Well, especially, I mean, we talked a little bit before this, like about this moment, and it can be really difficult when we're looking at politics and CNN and the news. And I think it's rightly so. We can be very discouraged. So you have to find those moments of joy. And I was like, you know what? Nothing is promised to us. So let me just do this.
Yeah. And you are someone that I have admired for a very, very long time. I met you when I was a baby undergrad at UCLA, and I've admired you because
you were this big.
Yes, I was tiny.
You were tiny.
I have grown.
Yes.
In all kinds of ways, in all kinds of inches and places that you never know.
We all have.
Like, since then, I've birthed 2 children.
That's right. Literally. Crazy.
But what I was going to say is I remember early on really looking up to you because, one, how approachable you always were.
Oh.
And 2, you've always been a community builder. You always have. Like, I admire your ability to tap into that network and community that you have. And so I know it's inevitable that like your community has your back. So you taking the sabbatical, it's not only going to help you, with whatever it is that you need to do to focus on during this time, but to really tap into that community in any way, shape, or form, even more so now. So anyway, thank you for sharing this part. I think it gives some context too, in terms of like your memoir and like diving into it. I'm curious, because this did start 2 years ago. What inspired you to write it when you started writing it? Why was that the right time? And also, why the memoir format in particular? Because not all of us are willing to write a memoir.
Well, as far as like why, like what was like poking it, I'm doing this, I'm like poking. So 2 things in particular. One, my daughter Zoe, who's in her early 20s, had been telling me for a couple years, like, you need to tell your story. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I was like, oh no one wants to read about me. I didn't honestly. It's in some ways it's a bit of a cliche. I think it's pretty true for many memoirists in particular, where you have this moment of like, why would anyone want to read about my life? And I think that's even more true for people of color, for women, for first gens, for working class or poor folks, always thinking that someone else's story is more compelling than our own. So there was that voice, that sort of poking was been in the ether for a bit. But specifically though, I was meeting with, I don't have her book next to me right now, but the November before I decided to write, I was interviewing Erica Alfaro, who had just published her memoir called Harvesting Dreams. And she self-published, and like at this point, Erica is now like writing and speaking full time. Like she ended up quitting her job altogether to do this. I'll never forget Yvette, her saying to me, like, look at me in the eye over Zoom saying, LaTanya, you should tell the story you wish you had in college. And I think shifting it from like, who wants to read my story to what did I want to read was made all the difference for me. And I was like, okay, well, what would have been, what did I need at that time? And I was pretty intent on not making it critical essays and not, because I do that all the time, right? I've done research, I say things on social media, and I present. So it was a deliberate choice to focus on storytelling and staying in the moment and sharing the point of view that I had at that time, and not slip in and say, and this is how people should think about first gens. It was really is an origin story. Once I knew I wanted to tell an origin story, then it unfolded the way that it did.
I wish that I could write a memoir, but
I absolutely could.
I think it's amazing how you are able to bring in so many memories that some of us, like, we just close off certain time periods of our lives.
That was hard.
Yeah, I mean, you start out with mentioning a pivotal moment. You're in third grade and your teacher's like, you're smart, you're going to go to college. And I'm curious why, like, this was a moment that stood out to you, and how this like early recognition perhaps even shaped the trajectory of your academic journey.
Well, decision was made. Tell your origin story. So I had to think of, you don't write every single thing that happens to you, right? You're curating bits and pieces from your life. So initially, when I sat down with Genesis, who was my editor, who's kind of like more like a thought partner, not like copy editor kind of thing, right? But was talking to her about the project, and I said, okay, I want to tell the story of how I got to college. But then I realized that really wasn't the message from my family. My message was, you're smart, right? And then it was like, okay, well, how does a smart girl get to college? And that's the approach that I took. And I was just I had to do some reflection about, well, when did I hear about college? And so that's why I opened with that particular story. Just the fact that I remember it was third grade, the fact that I remember my teacher's name lets you know that that was a pivotal moment, right? I don't know that it'd be fair to say, well, how did it shape my trajectory? I'd totally be spitballing and psychoanalyzing me. I don't know that, like, I can't say like, oh, from that moment forward, I knew that I was I don't think of any of that. I just know that particular moment stood out for me. And I could have just very easily gone back to playing double dutch right after that for all that I remember and know. But just the fact that that happened, which is a call to educators, that these little moment here, this woman said something to me, and to an 8-year-old, the fact that I still remember it today, lets you know, like, the power of that kind of support in those words.
Yeah, the power of words, and the power of how they make you feel, and what you're able to remember. Yeah, I think that's
decades later.
I mean, I have positive and negative things that I remember from my childhood, of things that people told me that stayed with me.
Yeah.
So it's a really good reminder. The other thing that stands out to me, aside from, hey, you're a smart girl, it's not just like that coming from an educational setting, but also like just coming from a long line of having strong women in your family who have shaped you. And in fact, before we recorded, we were talking about how beautiful your book cover is. And I know most people are going to listen to the audio. They're not going to see the video. So
yeah, well, I'll still put it up here, though.
Briefly describe, and I'll put the link to the book so y'all can take a look and click on it and order and take a look. But it's a really beautiful graphic image. It's the pink background with a basketball that says "Smart Girl." I'm sure you can describe it a lot better than me.
No, you're doing a
But it's
great
like the
job.
nod to like a comic book
Comic, that's
style.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so my mom, speaking of smart girls, right? My mom is a graphic designer, and so, this really is like a family project, but she offered to create the cover for me, and she created one version, which what I would argue is like the way she perceives me, and it was like an image of this, young woman looking so serious, and that I was like, "Mom, that's not me. Like, I'm not that serious to be honest." And I said, I really didn't want me on it. I described something. I said, "Hey, let's put a basketball on it." And I described it. I didn't describe the background so much beyond like the comic element, but I did say, "Hey, let's put a basketball. Let's put Smart Girl on it." And then this is what she came up with. So yeah, together, I would say together we collaborated on this. And one of the things that I was pretty intentional about with the project was not making it one of these stories of like the lone, like rugged individual trying to get to college, like that Horatio Alger story. I was not interested in that. I knew that I wanted to talk about my family, but one of the things became really clear to me early on is the role that women played in my family in supporting one another, and so many of them didn't go or didn't finish, and people poured a lot, particularly the women, poured a lot into me. So I wanted to make sure that I uplifted their stories as well.
Yeah. Sounds like the book could have also been called Smart Girls.
Smart girls.
Because you're like my mom, my
Yeah.
aunties,
My
like
aunt,
it's
yeah, my
yeah.
cousins, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah. Well, I see how they have clearly shaped your life, your educational and life journey. And I love
uh,
that it's a nod to that even in the book cover. And also, I was there at your book launch event and seeing so many of folks that showed up there too.
yeah,
That was really
yeah.
beautiful. So you can really feel that family support there. You also mentioned in your memoir this like navigating between different worlds. So
Oh,
coming
yeah.
from your Black working class background to then kind of navigating different academic spaces to then also like the tie-in between sports and academics. So I'm curious if you can talk about that, about the navigating of different worlds, these dual realities, and how this experience
Mm.
informs the work that you do with first gens now and with advocating on behalf of first gens too.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of my philosophy in working with first-gen students, because and I'm sure you, know this and have even experienced it. Oftentimes, this experience is framed in terms of what we lack and what we don't know. It's very common to say that, right? First-year students don't know what they don't know. I get that, and that's partly true, but that's not the whole story. So what I wanted to show, using my experience as an example, are the things that I did know and what I was raised on. And really the tension is, how do I take all those things, knowledge of sports, knowledge of hip hop, or just popular music in general, on and on and on. How do I integrate those things into academia, all the way through the pipeline, right? And so for me, that was really important. It really wasn't about how do I let go of all these things, or like, oh, learn how to eat with a knife and fork. Like, this is not an assimilationist narrative at all, right? This is about my call to others is the things that you love before you got to school are the things that are likely going to get you through. And I think we need to hear that a lot more often. So for me, that was definitely sports, right? But just all other kinds of forms of popular culture, which helps sustain me and continue to do that.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that for you, it was important to maybe push back against this popular narrative of first gens as lacking or as having deficits, and instead
Yeah.
to reframe it as something tied to like all the things that you bring with you that shape you, that are important to you, that are part of you, that in your case, it was sports. In your case, it was popular culture and music. And actually kind of going into this topic of music, your book comes with a playlist. And I love that. I love that kind of, pushing back against assimilation and maybe rethinking of it as a kind of, whether you want to call it integration or just like bringing different facets of yourself into your work. That's a really great message for folks, just to remind them that this is possible, that you can show up and bring in the things that you love into the work that you do, and people will resonate. And it actually reminds me of the other work you do in terms of the First Gen and Juice and the Catalyst Awards. And not everybody's going to know what I'm talking about, but the name First Gen and Juice as that tie-in to like, okay, who here understands that where that comes from, like the musical, ¿cómo se dice?
It's like the origin, like so from Snoop Dogg in this case. Absolutely. So you mentioned the playlist. I'll say this, that Smart Girl is like a whole experience. It's not just a book. There is a playlist. I even have a Pinterest account dedicated to Smart Girl. People can check out how I'm thinking about it on Instagram as well. I really wanted it to be accessible in a number of different ways, but also embody the whole pop culture spirit as well too. That's why the playlist was fun. And I'll drop another nugget. There's another playlist coming out as well.
A second one.
Yes.
Wait, so why not keep it all part of one and just add the new?
No, it's totally different. So this was a call out from a friend who was at the December launch. So my friend Justin said, "Hey LT, have you thought about a playlist that draws upon superhero soundtracks, right?" And so it's taking the arc of the book, but using soundtracks from TV shows, films, Broadway plays. I feel like I'm missing something, but the themes from the songs match the themes that are in the book. The playlist you're referring to are songs that are mentioned in my book for the most part. So those are different.
I'm taking a look at the playlist right now. Eminem, Kanye, Jackson 5, Prince.
So Janet Jackson. That's my girl right there. So for the most part, I would say about 80% of the songs on the first playlist just gives people a sense of what I was actually hearing. So I mentioned Janet Jackson, so you could hear the song that I'm referring to. But the songs at the very beginning and the very end are songs I would say are inspired by my experience.
Wow, I love that. It is definitely, like you said, the nod to the popular culture, but also making it more accessible, making it multimodal, giving people another way to experience the book. And I love that. I love that. So it's like you pick and choose, get the book,
get
the ebook, add the playlist.
Choose your own adventure. But it's all in the service of making people feel like, well, I can do that too. Right? I don't want people to feel like, oh, only certain people can write books and books only look a certain way. And so I'm not saying everyone needs to do a playlist or their story is like mine, but I do think it's true that these things are a really, really good reflection of who I am. And so what the call would be for someone else is like, well, who are you? And, what would your story look like? That's really the charge.
Yeah. I wasn't going to go there because when we were talking about this topic of music, I was thinking about like, how did, cultural touchstones, how did music and certain figures help you with navigating your educational experiences? But this is getting me to think beyond that and thinking about kind of inspiring the next generation of authors, of folks who write their own memoirs, to rethink how they do it. That's actually something I feel like you and I have in common, of exploring new and different ways to do these things. And even with my book, my co-authored book is Grad School for Me. One of the things that we have been doing is sharing a playlist of podcast episodes that complement the book, and a discussion guide with discussion questions to make it more lively with when different educators are using the book to help supplement their curriculum. So there's so many different ways to do
That's
this. You don't
it.
have to stick to just
Yeah. Yes.
opening up a Word doc and getting stuck.
Yes. That's my hope. I hope that's the
Yeah.
legacy, that we have more people telling their stories in these different ways. And for me, I self-published. I didn't go with the traditional publisher this time around. I've published before, but I decided to do something different. It was hard, let me tell you.
Yeah.
It's still hard, but I want people to know that it can be done, right? And they just need to find something that feels right and authentic for them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. See, there's so many pieces to this. From also, you mentioned you having a thought partner. That's another, way
Yeah.
of reminding people what you don't have to do this alone.
Oh
That's
my
another
gosh.
thing too that I noticed from learning more about you and the process, this entire process, is that you really leaned on support. You're like,
I
this is the
did.
person that helped me with my website. This is my mom who helped me with the cover. This is my person who helped me with thinking through, the book and what I was writing. This is my person who read
Yeah.
it, provided initial early feedback. And I love that because it goes to show that like it is a group effort. You don't have to do this alone. And if you have an idea, you can get it done.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a great reminder also for first gen students that, you may be the first, but you're
Yep.
not the last and you're not
Mhm.
alone.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of often mirrors a first gen journey, right? I think there's part of the educational process that tells you have to do things on your own, or you're cheating, or something like that. But for many of us, community is what got us there first place. And so why would we sort of leave community behind? I think that's pretty consistent with me. And yes, I did want to share it with others. And now I of course I wrote it, and I was the one up at 7 o'clock in the morning, but I was also bouncing ideas off of Genesis, my editor slash thought partner, who made the book better for sure.
This conversation is going somewhere completely different than where I usually go. I
Go for
usually
it,
just
lady.
stick to my questions but
I'm comfortable.
I appreciate where it's going now. And I was going to ask about your work with establishing successful first gen programs. But right now I'm thinking about perhaps how this book is going to shape and inform the future of the work that you will do. Because
Yeah.
especially I didn't have this information about this new transition you're going through and this sabbatical and focusing more on the
Sure.
memoir. So now in light of knowing that, I'm curious, yeah, what's to come in the future and what's to come in terms of the new iteration of the work that you have been doing for so long.
That's a
Yeah.
really great question. So I think a couple of things. Some things are known and some things are unknown. One of my goals is really to disrupt the publishing industry, right? The publishing industry in some ways is no different than any other corporation, higher ed, or
Mhm.
for-profit companies, that if people get frustrated that book covers look the same, it's because this genre looks this certain way. That's why these um, romance novels all have that same little cursive writing and the pastel background. Someone decided that that's the look, right? Even when we look at certain memoirs, there's usually the person's face and there's usually white lettering. And my book, challenges that. So I think I want to keep leaning in that direction. I don't want the common first gen narrative as someone who came from really low financial means and struggled. And oh, look, they made it to Harvard or Stanford or Princeton, right? That's so uncommon. So, and what can happen is people will feel like, well, I didn't do that. That's not my story. So my story must not be important. I'm hoping that people of all kinds of first gen backgrounds will say, hey, my story matters, right? And I didn't have to come from like complete poverty and make it to an Ivy League school in order to tell my story or other to be influential. So that's that. And then just in general, I mean, like I mentioned, I'm with My Tribe Media, and that's the goal of My Tribe, is to amplify these experiences, both with not just with first gens though, but with community college students and adult learners as well. And, Catalyst Awards is 5 years old now. And shout out to you for your accolades as well. But we just want to keep leaning in that direction. We hear from nominees and winners how much it means to them that the community has said, hey, this is a first gen narrative that is meaningful for me in so many different media forms, right? For you, I mean, look at you being nominated across genres. That's incredible. What does it mean to be a storyteller on a podcast, be a storyteller in a book? That's amazing. I think people are overlooking these stories, right? And I think, especially for women of color, and what I've noticed with Latina women in particular, there's a lot of folks telling their stories on podcasts. People are not paying attention to all that work that is happening there, right? We're just automatically looking at what's on Amazon. So there's just so many outlets right now. So I hope that not only are people producing more, but also you got to have the scholarship that comes along with it, that, that gives, like, tells us about the trends and things like that. So I hope we get more first gen critical analysis. That's what I hope.
There's so much to the work that you do, and I appreciate the nod to the work that I do, because with the podcast, I added a subtitle to my podcast. Part of the subtitle is Inclusive Grad School Stories, because with everybody that comes in, I want to know, who are you? What do you do? How did you get to where you are today? I ask the exact same question every single time to anyone new, including some folks that I've known for many years. And then I get insights on them that I had never known.
Exactly.
And
That's
it's
right.
so crucial and helpful in terms of context to understand where they came from, and then then ask the questions tied to
That's
the
right.
topics. I do
That's
think
right.
that storytelling is so important, especially hearing new and different ways, like stories
That's
that
right.
just defy what you're used to hearing. We're all so different that
That's right.
it makes no sense to get hung up on the same story.
Yeah, I'm
Right?
so glad that you're doing that. That's beautiful, and I'd love to see more of it.
Thank you so much. I'm curious though, is there any other question you were hoping I'd ask you? I definitely want to get your insights, and I want to, like, as we get close to wrapping up, hear more about how your book redefines Black first-gen narratives. You've already been saying that, or even just what message you hope folks get from the book.
Yeah.
But any other questions that you were hoping
Well,
that I'd ask?
no question. I'll just add, as we're thinking about sort of like the first gen narrative as a whole. I think sometimes we get caught up in like realism, right? Because like overcome so many things, so we want to tell that story, and I think that's great. But what I also want people to pay attention to, when they read Smart Girl, is like there's a lot of literary allusions, for example. So don't just read it straight. Like, I'll give an example. The prologue is very short. It's 2.5 pages, 3 pages at the most, about my fear of escalators I had when I was a kid. I don't even mention the word escalator because I don't want people to get caught up on that. The escalator is a metaphor, right? It's a metaphor for transitional moments. And I'm describing like my fear of like, how do I get onto this thing? Where do I put my foot? And I would argue that's the book. That is the book. Those 2.5 pages are about taking that next step. Who supported me? Who held my hand as I eventually made it onto that escalator? And so, there are other moments like that. I just want people to kind of like lean into it. Don't just take everything literally.
Yeah. I love that. One thing that pops to mind, I just can't help it. Growing up, I was always told, anytime I would do or say something, English major. And I don't know.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I was going to say that, actually.
I love the allusion.
English major alert.
I love the references. I love the metaphors. It sounds like you were really intentional with how you wrote this book. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. There even is a chapter that's framed as a word problem, as a math word problem. And I really lean into language that's arithmetic based as well. So, and that's just one. It's not like that throughout the whole book.
What
But
do you mean
there's
by that? Can you say more about that?
yeah, the chapter is called Long Division, and it is it's kind of a spoiler alert. I won't spoil it, but what I can say is it is framed like here's a math problem. How do you solve it? And in the language that I use, I emphasize things words like calculate and problem and solution and division and those types of things to add to that, to the idea of it being a math problem, like a
Wow.
really long word problem.
Yeah. And I mean, a couple of things. So one is the intentionality behind it,
Ow.
very, very particular about your word choice. And also you give us the arc of the book in the prologue of
I
like,
do. It's right there, y'all.
yeah, of the escalator moment and the transitions and the helping hands. I feel like that is a great kind of overarching message for the book. Do you have any other closing words or anything else that you wanted to share? It doesn't have to be about the book. It could be about you. It could be about your work. Just anything else that you want to share as we get close to wrapping up today.
Well, I'll just say this because, and it's funny as someone who also has written a dissertation, when people are like, oh my God, how do you write a book? How do you write a dissertation? You don't write it overnight, right?
Mhm.
It's bits and pieces, right? And so even if people have any kind of inclination, just write and don't judge yourself for how you're writing. If you write in your phone or what have you, just journal. I mean, two of the chapters in the book started off as things that I like blogs that I wrote years ago, right? And I just repurposed them. Not Top of the Pyramid, Fangirl, and Speaker of the House. I had written maybe about 10 years ago. And they were much shorter. And so just put something down on paper because you never know what can happen. And the main thing is you really want to write for yourself. Goes back to the beginning, what Erica said to me. Really write for yourself and don't get caught up in, oh, who's going to read it? But if you put out something that you enjoy reading, that's the goal. That's it right there, right? I mean, I think that is true, I would say, for your book. You wrote something that you needed.
Oh, yes.
I just
Yeah.
chose a different genre. This is what I was looking for when I was a freshman at UNC Chapel Hill, and I was literally pulling books off the shelf. I was looking for myself. I couldn't find it. Even in African American history, it was those stories were kind of outdated and all that. It's like civil rights, you know. So I had to tell the story of a Black girl who loved sports and you know who loved was a cheerleader. That story wasn't there, so now it is.
I don't know where I heard this, but what this reminds me of, somehow I heard that everybody has at least one book in them to write and to publish. And also you said, I was looking for myself and I couldn't find it on the shelves. And
Yeah,
that self-reflective work to get to the point of publishing a book and publishing especially a memoir, that's a huge nod to all that self-work of like,
definitely.
this is me, of
Mhm.
finding yourself and owning it and sharing that gift that is you with the
That's
world. And
right.
I wish that
Yeah.
we all had access to tap into that. And I hope that your message will help to motivate and inspire more people to
No,
pursue that for themselves, even if it's writing just for themselves, even if it doesn't make it to a
exactly.
bookshelf. Yeah.
That's right.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just wrote that quote down. I won't forget it. Now I'm going to put it all on social media.
But don't say it was mine because I don't know where I heard it.
I got it. I got it. I was looking for myself. That's what I said.
Oh, yes, that one,
Yes.
that quote. Yes, definitely. We got to quote that one. And I'll
Yeah.
pull that quote too as I share more about the episode.
Well,
Oh
thank
my
you for
goodness.
having me. This was a beautiful conversation.
Thank you, LT. It's always so much fun to be with you. I always learn something new every time I talk to you. I love being in shared spaces with folks that show up as their full authentic selves because it gives me permission to be that too.
Yeah.
And that's what you have exuded for so long. And we really see that written on the page as well. So I hope that folks will go ahead and get themselves a copy. So this is your chance to let people know how they can connect with you, how they can follow you, how they can get a copy and
Sure.
support your work.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a website. It's very easy, smartgirlbook.com, which, gives an overview of the book itself. And then if you're interested in purchasing it, it's on most major online booksellers. So, but if you don't want to give Jeff Bezos your money, I would really encourage you to look at sites like Tertulia.com, which is having a special promotion, Barnes and Nobles, etc. But there are some independent bookstores who also are selling the book as well. So look for Smart Girl by LaTanya Rease Miles. And I hope you enjoy. Let me know what you think of it.
Yes, I highly recommend you getting a copy of the book at one of your local bookstores, any independent bookstore. And also, just a heads up, even if you don't buy your book from Amazon, you can leave a review on Amazon and on Goodreads. So
That's right.
highly recommend, if you know any authors, including Dr. LT here, if you get a copy of the book, leave a review. Even if you didn't buy it on Amazon, leave a review on Amazon and Goodreads just to help us out, because it makes a big difference. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then, of course, you can also, I strongly recommend people request it from their local library.
Yes.
Whether it's the public library or their school library, that would be great for the community as well.
Yes. Oh, and how can folks follow you, your work, any other place they can find you?
Well, I'm trying to minimize my presence on Instagram, but I am on Instagram as Dr. LT Rease Miles. I think that's my name there. I also mentioned I'm on Pinterest. So LaTanya Rease Miles, Smart Girl author. Well, where else am I? I'm on Blue Sky as Smart Girl 07. And
Are you on LinkedIn? Okay.
I'm 1,000% on LinkedIn. That's easy too.
Pretty sure I've seen you on there.
I kind of live on LinkedIn. I don't know how. And then also Facebook as well too. I'm there again, trying to be mindful of the presence, but I am there if you're looking for me.
Yeah. So I'll include those links in the show notes. Thank you so much, LT, for joining us. Thank you for sharing more about you, about your work, about your incredible book. Really, really lovely as always to have you here. Looking forward to the next one, because I'm sure this won't be the last.
God, I can't even think about it. That's like, you know how that is. You have a child and then people ask you when you're going to have another baby. Let me enjoy this baby right
now. No, I'm having you back on as a guest.
For sure. Anytime.
But I'm also excited for if and when another book. Because when people ask me for another book, I'm like, oh, give me some time to process this.
Did we hear that? Exactly. People say smarter girl, smart woman. People already giving me titles.
Volume 2.
Right. Disc 2. That's what it should be. Disc 2.
That's so funny. Anyway, thank you so much again, LT. This was fun. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, here are 3 ways you can support the show. The first is to make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. The second way is to get your copy of my free resource kit linked in my show notes. This kit includes tools, worksheets, and podcast playlists on all things grad school, productivity, and personal development. The third way to support my show is to follow me on social media. You can find me on Instagram with the handle @Grad School Femtoring and on LinkedIn by searching my name. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.